I'm Senator Jim Tedisco. As you know, we have Senator Steve Rhodes with us, Assemblyman John McGowan, who was sponsoring the New York State Budget Transparency Act that we put in place. Senator George Borrello is here, and Senator Steve Rhodes, co-sponsor of this bill. Senator Wyke is here, Senator Oberacker is here, Senator Walczyk is here, no bow tie. Assemblyman Matt Simpson, Senator Patricia Cannizzaro Fitzpatrick, Senator Dean Murray, and Senator O'Meara. And as you can probably see here, we're here to talk about transparency in New York State, specifically as it relates to what arguably can be defined as the most important thing we do as a legislative body in New York State. But I don't want you to think that we're limited to thinking that there needs to be transparency throughout the New York State government. You know, we got a governor now who one of the most important things she said when she got here, and it was music to our ears when she said it, she was going to be the most transparent governor with the most transparent administration in the history of New York State. I think clearly we have a long way to go on that. She also said January 1, one of the most important issues she wants to deal with is keep people in New York State. Stop the bleeding, stop the out-migration. And as I look at the three budgets in the two houses and from the governor, basically one voice from one political affiliation, primarily from one region of the state, I don't think we're going to fulfill that challenge to beat that back with what we're looking at right now. And as we talk about transparency as it relates to this particular budget coming up, we are going down right now the same old slippery slope that history has shown us has not worked very well in New York State. We're about to reach a point, and whether it's 2 days past the budget, late, 3 days, on the day of the budget, that probably we're going to be asking the same question we ask at just about every budget once it comes to us in some way. And that's going to be a budget that probably brings us into our Senate and possibly the Assembly chambers at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And it's also going to be a budget which uses messages of necessity to get it done. And the question, which has become a rhetorical one right now, we never get an answer for it, is if you really think, the majority who controls all levers of power in New York State, that the way to do a budget is to do it in the middle of the night when you can't be here, the Fourth Estate, to cover it, to see the questions we want to ask, to see the concerns we have as a budget, as representing collectively our conference, millions of New Yorkers. And you think a message of necessity, not allowing us to read the budget, digest it, so we can better interact with our constituents in relationship to it. If you think that's a good idea to do a New York State budget, most important thing we do in the course of the year, why don't you have your press conferences at the same time for your individual concerns, 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning? They don't do that. You know why they don't do that? You do know why they don't do that. Because in darkness, democracy dies. They want transparency for their ideas and their singular issues. Not so much with a budget that's between $130 billion and probably $136 billion. Not so much transparency there. And I was thinking about that driving into work today. Who are most important to have us have transparency as a legislative body in New York State, dealing with everything but especially the budget? Who are the most important people, most successful people in moving the agenda forward? It's not governors, it's not senators, it's not assembly people. It's the most important part of this representative democracy. It's the taxpayers, it's the voters, it's the constituents we represent. They're the most important. Now, when we do this budget, I can't guarantee it, but if you look at history, it is going to be in the middle of the night. And what you're going to have is our constituents in the middle of their dreams. Hopefully they're having sweet dreams. But we may be about to create a nightmare for them with the budget we're putting in place right now. We are not only senators. We are not only public servants. We're representatives. And a representative gets back to its constituents, it listens to them, it finds out where they want their state to go, and it puts it in that place if it possibly can. It has an agenda. A budget is a collection of policies and programs and issues and gives us direction. This budget goes in the wrong directions, is the antithesis of what they're telling us. How do I know that? How do you know that? You've looked at the polls. You've looked at the surveys. Democrats and Republicans, same two issues resonate to the top of the list. When I get calls in my office and they tell me, when I get my pension, I'm leaving the state of New York. When my son or daughter graduates, we're leaving the state of New York. Why? Number one, they don't feel safe in the streets anymore. They're not quarantining necessarily because of COVID. They're staying home at nights, not going out by themselves because they're concerned about their public safety. It resonates to the top of the list in Democrats and Republicans across the board. Now, Governor Hochul had a tough election last year. 2-1 state. That was a very close election. I think somebody's telling her, you got a choice now. You can roll again, or you can stand up and take a stand now. And she put forth some proposals we can accept in terms of public safety, especially the concept of doing what 49 other states do. Give reasonable discretion to judges to decide if the person before them is a danger to themselves or others. Because as they've dumbed down carjacking and burglaries and muggings and assaults, and the least restrictive decision is put in place, the public knows and they see it. It's happening in my district. It's happening in my colleagues' district, Democrats and Republicans. I think the data shows that. The governor has given us the data. Probably top of the list. A photo finish was that. What that is, they can't afford to live in New York State anymore. Taxes and spending, they talk about. Taxes and spending. Now, when enough people, 319,000 left last year, #1 in out-migration of all 50 states. This is a beautiful state. We love this state. People love this state. They don't want to leave this state. We're one of 7 states that lost another representative, lost power to debate and discuss and support us in New York State. We're behind Florida now in population. We're 4th. When enough people leave the state who can afford to leave the state, and we've said this before, U-Haul is doing well, one of the businesses that's doing well in New York State. But when enough people leave the state who can afford to, in the middle class and the lower incomes, in a $230 billion to $236 billion budget that we're seeing right now, who's going to pay for infrastructure, education, health care, daycare, libraries? It will not, it's not sustainable. Hopefully there won't be another pandemic. Now, you look at what they've said, you look at spending, $16 billion in increased spending, 7 from the governor, and then my Senate colleagues added $9 billion more to that. That's not sustainable. Going above and beyond that, the engine that makes our economy roar, small businesses, is being taxed. That $8 billion, remember when our governors closed down our small businesses, people had to go home, it was the COVID virus. Well, we had to give them unemployment. The governor borrowed $8 billion from the federal government. How did she pay it back? Not like 3/4 of the states did with the back end of COVID dollars, pandemic money from the federal government. She paid it back by an $8 billion assessment fee on small businesses, $200 per employee, and $27.68 of interest ongoing. She's doubled down, this government has doubled down on just the opposite of what a representative should be hearing and is hearing from the surveys and the polls and in our offices. So what we're saying now, at least on this budget, and this is a constitutional change, this bill we're talking about, and there are other bills that would change the Constitution. But we can't keep using a message of necessity when the way they're using it does not exist. Those people who built this Constitution built in it a message of necessity because we do need a message of necessity on occasion. What's it for? It's for an emergency, a weather condition where our constituents are in danger, their health, their safety, and well-being. Got to get in there maybe and do something about it. An attack on our sovereignty, a terrorist attack on our government, a financial problem that needs immediate attention, maybe other emergencies also. Those are emergencies. Turning a necessity, a message of necessity into a message of convenience is not appropriate for what it was meant for in the Constitution. So what this bill does is two things. We shouldn't be working in the middle of the night when the Fourth Estate can't be there, when there is a total lack of transparency, where people are sleeping, the most important part of our representative democracy, the people who need our attention. And we shouldn't be brought in when we don't have time to read the budget, digest it, and really debate it. So you can print the answers to those questions. The last thing they want to do is answer questions about this budget when you see the surveys which relate to those top two areas I talked about. They want to get in, they want to pass these 11 or 12 bills, they want to go on vacation, and then you'll have to track them down and make them answer the questions we're going to be asking so you can tell our constituents. That's not the way government should work. So this is going to take two successive bodies of government. It's going to be a very difficult lift with the control they have, both houses and the governor. We understand that. But we have to do what we have to do to get that transparency. But what we're asking them, at the very least, be proud of the product you bring forward, bring it out between 8 a.m. and 12 midnight. That's what the legislation says, that you could not go beyond that, and never use a message of necessity. We do not need a message of necessity. These are not emergencies. I mean, if we go 2 months or 3 months and school districts and non-for-profits have to borrow because the education money is, but we pass extenders all the time. I hate to see us pass extenders. I want an on-time budget. My colleagues want on-time budgets, but we'd rather have a good budget. One where we prove that we're representatives, where we listen to people that we represent, and that's why we told them to elect us. So we can get back to them and say, what do you want your state to be? They want to be safe. They want to be able to afford to live here. They love the state. But a lot of them are leaving right now. And I want to let you know this. Me and many of my colleagues, we'll work 24/7 every day, 7 days, as many days as it needs for them to get their heads straight and look at the fact that they've each had different budgets. They've each known for months and weeks what the differences are. These each had the chance, they control all levers of power to negotiate and come to a compromise. Whenever they do, we're ready to do the budget. But at that point, no matter where it is, we want to do it in the light of day between 8 a.m. and between midnight, and we don't want to have a message of necessity. We want to understand the budget, and we want to be able to debate, and we want you there to listen to the debate, to listen to the questions. That's what this proposal is all about. But the real request we have, because this can't be done, but they could do it themselves. They could do the right thing that a representative should accomplish, and that's transparency on the most important thing we're charged with doing. Right now, I'd like to have one of the co-sponsors speak to you, Senator Steve Rhodes. And Steve, come on up.
Good job.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Jim said all there was to be said. As always, he's done an amazingly thorough job. Look, the bottom line is there needs to be transparency. As Senator Tedesco said, we have a budget that is going to be somewhere between $227 and $236 billion. That needs to be done in sunlight. That doesn't need to be done in darkness. There's, over the Library of Congress, there's a saying inscribed on the wall. The essence of government is power, and power, as it must be lodged in human hands, will ever be liable to abuse. That's why it's so important that what the New York State Senate, what the Assembly does, is in daylight, so that everyone has the opportunity to see. We're a representative republic. People don't have the ability to vote directly on the New York State budget or any piece of legislation that we advance in this state. I represent 325,000 New Yorkers. My colleagues standing behind me represent their own constituencies. I need feedback from my constituents, and we can't get feedback when a budget bill is being dropped on us at the last moment with a message of necessity. Now, the normal process is that a bill will have to age for at least 72 hours. That gives a reasonable opportunity for people to review the bill, find out what's in it, and be able to get feedback and make a decision as to how we're going to vote. When you're talking about the budget, that's not one bill with 200-300 lines of text. You're talking about a massive document that's not just about how we fund our government and what our priorities are, but there are also policy provisions inside that budget. And if you look at some of the major pieces of legislation that have passed through the budget process in just the last couple of years, these are significant and consequential issues that people need to fully understand before we vote. Bail reform, the New York SAFE Act, redistricting, casino gambling, the DNA database, pension reform. Even in this budget, we're seeing the housing compact that will dramatically change the landscape of suburbia if it passes as it was proposed by the governor. More changes to bail reform, the MTA payroll tax, another major issue. And there are dozens, if not more, major policy issues that are going to be contained in this budget document. And the notion that this can be dropped at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you certainly are not going to be here, when we will be here struggling to review something that we're going to vote on at 5 o'clock in the morning with a message of necessity from the governor. That message of necessity enables the legislature to short-circuit the process. A message of necessity means that we don't have to follow the 72-hour rule. And so what this legislation says is not that there can never be a message of necessity. If there is, 2/3 of the Senate and the Assembly must vote to consider whether that message of necessity is actually an emergency. Because now, as Senator Tedesco said, this has become a message of convenience. The budget deadline is April 1st. Our fiscal year starts April 1st. It started April 1st. Gosh, I don't know. I'm new here. But it started April 1st, I'm sure, for at least the last 100 years.
Well, I was here then.
Yeah, Jim was here. It's not a surprise. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle entirely control the process. The majorities in the state Senate, the majority in the state Assembly, and the governor have known that April 1st we were supposed to have a budget. As it is today, we know that we're not going to have a budget by April 1st unless something is presented to us with a message of necessity. The fact that you couldn't properly plan, the fact that you couldn't do your job on time, does not create an emergency for the people of the state of New York. And so the use of a message of necessity in this instance would be completely inappropriate. This bill would allow that issue to be heard. And unless a 2/3 majority of both houses agrees that a message of necessity is necessary, that budget bill will not be heard. This is last year's budget. Drop that on someone's desk at 2 o'clock in the morning and ask them to review it for a vote at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's not possible. It's not possible for legislators. It certainly isn't possible for the media and for the public. And you are an important vessel in getting information out to the public. You should have a reasonable opportunity to be able to review that, to be able to get feedback from legislators, to be able to ask questions so that you can accurately report to our constituents what's contained in that document. But to try and do that under the cover of darkness with the use of a message of necessity is a disservice to the people of the state of New York. And so I want to thank Senator Tedesco. This was his idea, and it's a wonderful one. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to co-sponsor it. We are perfectly happy, willing, able, and eager to put in the work. But the bottom line is, we have to make sure that we understand what's contained in any bill that's coming before us, but particularly in a budget that's so critically important, have an opportunity to digest it and have an opportunity to get information out to the public where the provisions contained in that budget will have a dramatic impact on their daily lives. So I want to thank my colleagues for being here as well. And again, thanks Senator Tedesco for the opportunity.
Good. And it's happened before where we have adjusted our budget process as it relates to budget themselves. We no longer, as you know, the law says 3 days on top of our desk in paper form. We're saving millions of dollars because we put a tablet on our desk and we have those thousands of pages in that tablet. We can go to anything we want. We're helping the environment and we're not filling landfills with a lot of paper. So that's one good thing we did in the past. And this isn't just the New York State Senate, which has this lack of transparency and these later in the morning effects of trying to do a budget. It's a New York State Assembly also. It's the team collectively who can't get it straight and get it on time and can't get to that transparency. And I'm going to introduce to you now Assemblyman John McGowan, who is the sponsor of this piece of legislation in the New York State Assembly. And then Senator George Borrello is going to speak, who is also a co-sponsor of this particular bill. So, Assembly Member, good to have you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is John McGowan. I'm an Assembly Member for District 97 in Rockland County. And I want to start by thanking Senator Tedesco for inviting me here today, for putting this press conference together, and really being a united front, both houses of our state legislature, moving forward with this resolution, this legislation. What we're talking about today is very simple. And really, we're talking about legislation that fosters and promotes necessary components of a fair legislative process. As outlined by my colleagues, the legislation prohibits the passing of laws between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m. And why is that so important? Why is that something that we're here together, gathered representatives from both the Senate and the Assembly here today to talk to you about? Well, it's highlighted now during this budgetary process. But it's important because it allows for transparency of that process. It promotes full participation of all duly elected legislators because it affords, and I like the word that Senator Tedesco used, it affords representatives of our state a full opportunity to be heard. We have seen numerous examples of legislation, important legislation, being voted on and passed in the middle of the night, especially during this time, the budgetary process. My colleague Senator Rhodes mentioned redistricting, casino gambling, pension reform, that's another one, teacher evaluations, the New York SAFE Act. These are important, vital pieces of legislation, to name a few. It's legislation that has immediate or daily impact on the lives of New Yorkers. It's legislation that must be debated, must be considered, and voted in a manner that allows transparency to the public, to the media, and again, full participation of the elected body. This is common sense. This is fair. This is protection from attempts to cover, to conceal, or to rush the passage of especially controversial pieces of legislation in the middle of the night. New Yorkers deserve transparency, and they deserve to know that their elected representatives are advocating for them on every bill with due consideration and have that opportunity to analyze, consider, debate, and do their jobs representing them. So once again, I want to thank Senator Tedesco. I want to thank Senator Rhodes for co-sponsoring this legislation in the Senate. I want to thank my colleagues who are here today in the state legislature. We're here together to be a united voice because this is such an important issue for our constituents and for New York State as a whole. So once again, Senator, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Senator George Borrello was an early sponsor of this particular bill, but it impacts all of us who are standing here and all of us who are elected officials from our conference and probably some of their members. I'd like to have the senator come up and speak, if he could. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Senator Tedisco and Assemblyman McGowan for bringing this forward. New York State ranks at the bottom of a lot of things, unfortunately. Of course, affordability, safety, and certainly transparency. We hear from good government groups on all sides of the aisle that New York State lacks transparency. And our governor has paid lip service that she wants to be more transparent. But the bottom line is this state does not share what it's going to do with the people that it represents, the people that pay the bills. I'm proud that I spent 10 years in county government as a county legislator and county executive. And I've always said that if New York State government ran half as well as county government, New York State would be a better, safer, more affordable place to live. Instead, we have this process that continues to be short-circuited with this message of necessity. We have things that pass in the middle of the night. In county government and local government, when you do a budget is about numbers. It's about a forecast of what we're going to spend, how we're going to fund those important projects, the things that people need, the roads, bridges, all that. But what's in New York State's budget? It's a lot of controversial policy. Why do we have policy in a financial document? It's so we can hide. So we can hide things like bail reform. We can hide payoffs to special interests in thousands of pages that get stumped on your desk. I had someone contact me this morning, a member of EMS, that said, the Department of Health is going to be able to change the lines without our consent as to what areas we're going to be able to service. Emergency services. Well, where is that? Is that a piece of legislation, I asked? No, it's in the budget. Why would that be in the budget? Because they know it's going to be unpopular. Because they know we're not going to have time to vet it. Because they know that they are satisfying a radical special interest by hiding it within the pages of that document. That has to end. And it can start by making sure that there is no message of necessity unless it's truly an emergency. It can start by ensuring that we all have time to look through that document. New York State government has baked corruption into the cake, and that cake is rotting in front of us. That needs to change, and this bill, this change to our Constitution, is a great way to start. And I want to thank the sponsors again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good job. I think as we go into midnight tonight, into Thursday, you can count on the fact it's a foregone conclusion. This budget is probably, I would say it's going to be late. I don't think there's any question about it. You probably can start talking about that. But I want to make sure when they talk about the budget being late, and I'm told it's Saturday, 1 second past 12 o'clock midnight. Now, so on Saturday, you can all announce, as the fourth estate, you can inform the public that your state government is going to be late on the most important thing it is expected to do. And that probably, if we look at history, it's going to be done at least partially, maybe wholly, in the middle of the night, if they don't follow our request. It's going to be done with messages of necessity, no matter what day or they depend on getting it together and getting it done. It's probably going to happen that way. If you do print that, if you do send that message out, nobody in the state of New York is going to think that's an April Fool's joke, okay? They're all going to know that's not a prank because they've seen it before over and over again. And when you say those dastardly words, it's always been done that way, though. Yeah, but it's not the right way to do it. And it is time to change it. No matter who was in charge, it's time to do it right, and it's time to have transparency. We can't have 600,000 people leave the state of New York, walk out of this beautiful state, because we're not listening to our constituents and really being a representative of what they say their concerns are. And we see the surveys, and we see the polls. So if anyone has any questions, we have our Ways and Means person here, Senator O'Meara, and he'll be happy to answer them all.
Senator, just to play devil's advocate, one thing that Democrats, I think the governor, has said is that there's no broad parameters of what's being discussed right now. We know they're talking about potential tax increase on very wealthy people. They're talking about NBA payroll tax, and they're talking about wage, et cetera. So, the details certainly do matter, but if we know the broad parameters, is that good enough necessarily to understand what's like?
Well, I don't think it is good enough. I think they have to have a budget on time because it's the most important thing we do. And even if it was good enough leading up to this, they've had enough time to get those negotiations in place? Why is it the same old way? They come up, they either do it in the middle of the night on the deadline, or they go past it. And then in the bad old days, we were 2 or 3 months. In the school districts had to borrow, and non-for-profits on occasions had to borrow. We fought over extenders. What we're talking about is whenever they get it done, there seems to be a lack of transparency on how they want to get it done. No matter when even if they got it on time, I get the feeling they do it in the middle of the night, again, at least partially, or they would continue to use messages of necessity. What we're saying is that when you get the budget done, we'll work 24/7. You're a full charge. We can't tell you what's going to be in that budget because you have control of both houses. You have the triumvirate here. But when you do it between 8 a.m. and noon so you, the Fourth Estate, can be there and you can see the debate, and we are able to debate it because, as I said, we digest it because we'll have 3 days to look at it. And I don't think that's a lot to ask, and I do think that is a severe lack of transparency.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim, can I add something to that?
Yeah,
real quick?
Dean.
You mentioned the MTA payroll tax. So we have a governor's proposal that increases the MTA payroll tax. You have a Senate proposal that wants to tax the rich and cut it in certain areas, the payroll tax in certain areas, keep it in other areas. They want to add a corporate tax surcharge. You have an assembly that wants to add a tax to Uber and Lyft rides and a tax onto streaming services like Netflix, et cetera. Which one's it going to be? You know, it's broad stroke is one thing, but how is this going to affect the people? They're counting on us to know that and be able to debate that. And having just a couple of hours to figure out which one of the menagerie of things they're coming up with to hit the taxpayers again, we need to be able to know that and debate that and give them the real details. Oh, I'm Senator Dean Murray.
You tried passing similar legislation like this in previous years, correct?
Pardon me?
You tried passing similar legislation like this in previous years?
Adam, when did we put this in place?
2014 or something.
Yeah.
So what has the response been from colleagues across the aisle?
You're hearing it. Nothing, crickets, okay? Like I say, we know this is a heavy lift. We're trying to make the point, unilaterally do this. It's the right thing to do. This is a big issue. It's the most important thing we do. They talked about the programs and the policies and the direction we're taking. Be a representative. Are you listening to them or not? I don't think they are representing them because there's nothing in here about public safety. What they said to the governor is, it's a non-starter. We're not going to change this. We don't care how many people who commit violent crimes, recidivism, are continuing to do that. We're going to keep rolling with it. And if people leave because they can't afford to live here anymore, so be it. 319,000. Because they're talking $16 billion of increased spending and taxes on what I would describe as many small businesses. And they are the engine that moves our economy and creates those jobs. And as I said, middle class and lower income, you're not going to be able to pay for all these important programs anymore because the people who are leaving can't afford to leave. And they're going to continue to do so if we keep moving in the opposite direction, doubling down in the other direction of what our constituents are telling us are the two. Now, there's a whole bunch of issues there, housing and a lot of other important issues, but they don't rise to the level as public safety and the ability to afford to live in New York State anymore, this beautiful state.
So, are you considering going, taking a broader approach to get past the Democratic majorities and governors who call for transparency to petition to a referendum or constitutional convention or something that gets you beyond the majority?
Well, I'm not big on the Constitution. I don't want to open up the Constitution for a convention because worse things can happen to us. We might not even get what we're looking for here. I wanted to go to the most important part of our representative democracy, put it on the ballot, 2 successive legislative bodies pass it, and let them decide what is transparency and what is not. Do they want their representatives to have time to ingest this and be able to debate on behalf of the millions of people we represent, as well as some of the people over there, too, maybe? We're just, you know, the man who put that quote was part of the Fourth Estate, and he saw what happens when there's a lack of transparency. Not too many good things happen in the middle of the night. You know, what I was going to do is shut off all the lights in this room and say this is an example of you not being able to do your job and us not being able to do our job. If we couldn't read our notes here because it was too dark in here, we couldn't, as representatives, get out to you the concerns we have here, and probably your cameras wouldn't work if it was too dark here. I didn't do it because we couldn't shut the shades, and we don't know how to shut off this light. So we let the light in anyway. We had the transparency. But that's the point here, transparency on the most important issue we do. I don't know if any of my other colleagues want to, yeah.
So what might transparency efforts look like for this, that's doing today, because obviously this project that might not move on about this year's budget, I guess, you know, what do efforts look like for this year's budget to increase transparency?
What efforts are here?
What efforts might look like to increase transparency for this year's budget?
Well, for this year's budget, this is the effort right here. We have to use the bully pulpit. I mean, we got 21 hardworking members in our conference who I think are right on most of the issues because we're in line with Democrats and Republicans on the top two issues that the survey say is the reason why people are packing up and leaving the state of New York. And if they continue to do that, this will not be the Empire State anymore. We're fast moving towards becoming the empty state. You know, that's a huge exaggeration, but it's an illustration of we don't want people to leave. We want people to stay in New York. So we're trying to use your media because you're the Fourth Estate. I think you should be concerned about transparency also because we're not only locked out. When they're working 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm not sure how many of you can be around doing what you're supposed to do. You're obligated to do, report in an unbiased way exactly what side's asking what questions, what kind of answers we're getting. And are the answers corroborating what a representative would do at this point in our state to keep people in New York State, keep them safe, and keep them be able to financially be able to live and grow a family, get a job, go to school, have their kids graduate, pay the tuition, build a business. You know, we have one of the highest levels, I don't know if you know this, of all 50 states, of a percentage of senior populations. We have one of the lower percentage of new births in New York State. What does that tell you? Young people aren't staying here, growing a family, having children. They're not coming here from other states, from other areas nationally. And so senior citizens can't afford to pack up and leave the state here. But the young people can. And that's a sad indictment on transparency and what the agenda has been, to force them to pack up and move out.
And just a quick follow-up, if you don't mind, Senator. Look, as far as this year's process, there is nothing that this legislation is going to do other than sound the alarm yet again. It's the three people who are in charge, the governor, Speaker Heastie, and Andrea Stewart-Cousins as the president of the Senate. They're the ones that can answer the question as to whether or not there's going to be transparency in this year's budget or whether we are going to rely upon the same gimmicks that they use every single year to get a budget. And so that question might be posed better to them. But thank you.
Now, $130 billion, $136 billion, we know there are good things, 8.5% for our direct care workers, very supportive. They had the swap bill, $100 million, which I authored and gave to Senator Hinchey because probably I knew I wasn't going to get it passed. The sister program for CHIPS, it's an important program. It looks at the sub-level. The comptroller says we got a $30 billion monster underneath the 100-year-old pipes, water, sewer, gas pipes. We're putting down good CHIPS money to build roads and bridges. They're collapsing because of 100-year-old pipes on the sub-level. So there are some very good things in here. We're full of funding education, but holistically, it's failing in terms of representing the top needs and concerns of our constituents, which in every survey and poll you're hearing. So because we're going to vote against largely most of this budget, well, at least I am probably, I haven't seen it yet, maybe they'll change their mind, that doesn't mean we're against many of the programs. We fought for many of the programs in here. But we have to do what's right in terms of listening to our constituents. We feel we're representatives in that sense. Thank you very much.
so much.
Thanks to my colleagues. Hey, did you want to say something? I think, I miss Senator Walzak. Come on.
You're going to
sit.
put me up anyway.
Yeah, I'll put you up anyway. Yeah, I forgot he wanted to say something.
Well, in that case, just a giant thanks to the fourth branch of government for providing all of the accountability that you can of a government that continues to try and skirt around you. I know that point was made today, but it says something that you showed up and took time out of your day today to cover this transparency issue, and we appreciate everything that you do on that forefront. So thanks for coming out.
Thank you very much.